Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elder Scrolls Online Game Director, Matt Firor.
Hi, guys. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Future of Elder Scrolls Online panel. I'm Matt Firor. I'm the Game Director on Elder Scrolls Online. Before we get started, did you guys see that Doom thing they did last night? Really hard to follow that up. That looked awesome. And while I'm on that, thanks to id and Bethesda for having us here to talk today. It's a great honor. It's the first QuakeCon I've been to, so it's been a lot of fun so far. Love it. I love the people. It's great to walk around and see gamers doing what they do best. So thanks for having us. So, in addition to the great audience we have here, we are live streaming this on Twitch on the Bethesda channel. So welcome to all you guys out there in internet land. The way this is going to work today is we have a panel of ESO devs that are going to come out and talk about different parts of the game. After that, we'll follow it up with a Q&A that we've been collecting from Twitch and also from our forums and from Reddit. So before we bring them out, though, just a few words. It's been, believe it or not, only about 12, 13 weeks since Elder Scrolls Online launched. So it seems like a long time, but it actually hasn't been that long. So this is a great time for us to talk about what's going to come up next, what's coming up in the future, because we've gotten through kind of the trials and tribulations of a major MMO launch. Things are pretty smooth now, and now we're going to talk about what we're working on in the future. So you guys, if you read the forums and everything, you notice about 2 weeks ago we started to talk about our future plans a lot more. I wrote a blog post. Paul Sage has been doing a lot of interviews. This presentation is going to be follow-up to that. You're actually going to see some video in-game of what we're talking about, of some of the cool systems that we're working on. We're going to go into a little depth on these. So it's going to be about an hour and a half of information about ESO, and you're actually going to see some cool stuff. So before I get started, I want to, before we get everyone out here, I want to talk about the team. We have a really, really great dev team on ESO. These guys are tons of experience, and I cannot think of a better bunch of people to work with. So I'm going to bring them out one at a time, and I'll introduce them as I go. First up is Brian Wheeler. He's our lead PvP designer. He's going to be talking to you about the He'll be talking to you guys about the Imperial City, our first PvE, PvP dungeon, and you can see what the Imperial City's like 700 years before Oblivion, after a major Daedric invasion. Next up is Rich Lambert, our lead content designer. Rich is going to talk about things we're doing to help with grouping, systems that we're working on, and some new areas of the game. Next up, Jesse McIntyre, our lead client programmer. So, games like ESO are obviously hugely complex. There's a bunch of systems. People always ask us, what does it take to put in a technical feature into ESO? So we decided to put a spotlight on one feature that we're working on right now, which is an advanced facial animation system, so that characters look more realistic and lifelike when you talk to them. So Jesse's going to go over that. Just kind of spotlight one of the cool things that we're working on. Paul Sage, next, creative director. Little known facts about Paul Sage, he is indeed a Dallas native. So, so Paul has been giving interviews the last couple of weeks about two major initiatives that we're working on. The revamp of our veteran content systems and replacing it with the champion system, and also the justice system. He's going to be going into both of them in this presentation. Nick Kronkle, gameplay lead. Nick's going to be talking about one of the most requested features in ESO, which is spellcrafting, and he's going to show off some videos too. And last, but certainly not least, is Jared Carr, our art director. So Jared's responsible for picking up the mics that fell on the floor, as well as he is the guy responsible in large part for making this a really, really kick-ass, awesome-looking game. So he is going to be talking to you guys about some PvE zones that we're working on, some new content. He's going to be going over some new armors and weapons that are going to be going into the game, and also what we're doing to make combat and animations much more responsive. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over now to Brian Wheeler, who is going to talk to you about the Imperial City. Thanks, everyone, and I'll be back on later.
Well, now that the boss is gone, before I talk about Imperial City, again, I'm Brian Wheeler, the lead PvP designer, and we have had a PvP contest here at QuakeCon. It's been great having the team show up, having you guys show up to support them. It's the first ever PvP contest we had, and we have our 3 finalists for tomorrow. Come out to the booth, cheer them on. You see them on Twitch out there, and we hope you guys like watching it as much as we like having them fight in it. So let's get to the meat, right? People have been asking about Imperial City ever since we pretty much announced. So now we're going to finally give you some details of it. First and foremost, it is a PvP zone. You get to go in there, kill enemy players. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's in Cyrodiil. It's PvP flagged. Not only is it PvP flagged, but there's also a lot of really cool monsters in there to kill. There's bosses, mini bosses out there, some of which you'll see in some videos coming up that the team has done a really good job making them look pretty much badass as possible. The other big point about it is that you get to rid Imperial City of Molag Bal's minions, and this is his last-ditch effort. He's trying to take over Imperial City with that huge anchor. If you've been inside of Cyrodiil at all, you've seen the white gold tower with the big anchor on it and the chain sticking into the city. This is your chance to go in there and experience that content and actually capture several districts. When you capture the districts, you'll get a lot of rewards for it. You can actually respawn at a district once you own it, much like the keeps out in Cyrodiil. So that's a really cool bonus that we're adding to it. There's unique bosses and mini bosses like I mentioned before, and of course, something that's a really big draw is the PvE quests, as well as the monsters give a lot of XP and a lot of gold. This is very important because it makes not only rewards for the PvPers to kill other people, which I love doing, but also just having everybody go out there and experience as much cool content as possible to get a lot of really good rewards for it, and having the experience and thrill of rush of being able to get killed by enemy players. That's a whole lot of fun. So in case you're curious where Cyrodiil is and you've been living under a rock, and it's where Oblivion took place, but also Imperial City's kind of right there. It's in the middle, so, you know, where else would it be? It's the center of Cyrodiil. It's really cool, and you can kind of get a hint of what the huge anchor on top of White Gold Tower looks like. So what's going on in there? Everybody knows that the arena exists in there, and this is 700 years ago since Oblivion. But it's a little different. The Dremora have taken over. Again, this is sort of like they have nothing else to do. They've taken the Imperials and enslaved them. So why not throw them in the arena, have some pretty sick gladiatorial games with them, have them get killed, and it's your job to kind of go in there and help stop it. And that's just in one of the districts. But it sort of looks a little like this. Ooh. Dremora were cheering on the guys getting all murdered up. I feel bad for them. But you get to go help them out. So, one of the next districts is the Arboretum. This is another one of those very iconic districts that we wanted to show that it isn't completely taken over yet by the Cold Harbor. You get to see a little bit of flora and fauna in here that's not fully corrupted, and you get to go in there and help make sure that that life carries on when you kick out the Dremora. And it looks a little bit something like this. Again, you'll recognize some Imperial architecture. You see the Imperial sigils, and we're doing our best to make sure it stays faithful to Oblivion, just like what we did with Cyrodiil. That's pretty cool looking. Next we have the market. This is another district that's pretty iconic, but this is one that you can actually capture. And when you capture it, there's going to be basically a switch from Daedra control to an alliance control, and you can actually take a district back from another alliance. And again, once you own it, you can actually respawn there, but also other things like that give your alliance a bonus. In this situation, in the market, they have specific trade skill stations that let you create Imperial Daedra gear. It's a new armor set that's coming out with Imperial City. It looks really cool. Jared is actually going to give you a preview of what that looks like later on. The armor's really badass, and you'll be able to make it once you flip the market district. That was pretty cool. So in that center area, you saw the impact crater where one of those large anchors comes and slams down into the district. That's a lot of fun to actually fight off the enemies as well as see that thing snap and shoot back up. The Temple District. This is the Temple of the One if you played in Oblivion, but Tiber 7 didn't exist around now, so it's way, way, way back in time. This is actually where they're trying to kickstart the plane meld. If you've played the game, you know that in the beginning you actually get sacrificed and get sent to Cold Harbor. So they're starting to do that over again underneath the Temple District, and you get to go in there and help stop it from happening as opposed to being sacrificed this time. I think my fillings just fell out, so. So how do you get in? We thought it would be a very cool idea to pay homage back to Oblivion and have you enter Imperial City through the sewers. You left the sewers to get out of this Imperial City in Oblivion, so we thought it would be a great idea to have you actually go back in via the sewers. Also remember, these three entrances are in Cyrodiil, so you can imagine the crazy PvP combat happening out in here to try and stop people from getting in. And so far, this is what we have those looking like. So nice and serene now, but you know when people are camping those, that's going to be a nightmare. So when you get into the sewers, and every alliance has a starter location, much like you do in Cyrodiil. This area is safe, you won't get camped. We're doing our best to make sure that it is absolutely 100% safe so you can get the story of what's going on. You come in here and you actually find out that the Imperials need your help. When you were out in Cyrodiil, their last standing orders were to kill you because that's what they were told to do, to defend Cyrodiil. But these guys in Imperial City, they're a little bit more entrenched. Their standing orders are get help. We don't care who is helping us, which alliance, it doesn't matter. They just need you to help get their citizens back and help fight off Molag Bal. So again, every entry, this is where you start to get the story of what's going on. And this is sort of what they're shaping up to be. Again, we want to make sure that you have to drop into combat to be safe, and each alliance will have one of these in a huge sewer network. So again, each alliance has their own entry location. They're all connected with a large sewer network, and with a lot of sewers you'll recognize from Oblivion. But we added some new sections to make sure that you actually crossed with the other alliance's path. At the deepest level of the sewers, we have this section called the Crossroads. It's the most corrupted by the takeover from Oleg Ball. There's portals that pop up underneath as opposed to dark anchors that spawn from above. And this is where you're going to get a small sample of some of the monsters we have added. You'll see in here a Grievous Twilight, which is sort of a winged, baddie gargoyle-looking guy. And of course, if you watch the Blur trailers, you're going to see the Flesh Colossus super-duper badass trademark guy. He's really cool. Our designers have had a lot of fun making him, and you guys are going to be able to kill him in this. And it's a lot of coolness to see in this. He's big, he's mean, he's out to get you. So that's just a taste. I know we didn't have many PvP stuff shown in there, but I want to show you the environment that you're going to be able to kill people in, as well as the coolness of Imperial City. Again, you get to take districts over, you get to respawn in it. That's a new twist. Only one alliance is in at a time. So that means when one side comes in, the other side's sitting there, you get to wipe them out. Or even better, you can camp out in Imperial City, wait for another alliance to flip it, log back in, and kill them. So there's all kinds of dirty tricks you can do and have fun with Imperial City because it's PvP flagged. And there's going to be a lot of cool content in there, new armor to get, and I hope you guys are going to have a lot of fun playing it as much as we have making it. Next, I'm going to turn it on over to Rich, who's going to give you some really cool stuff about content and all the great things they're doing.
All right, thanks, Wheels. Hi, everybody. My name's Rich Lambert, and I'm the lead content designer for Elder Scrolls Online. And I'm here today to give you all a really quick preview at some of the things that the content teams are currently working on for future updates. The first thing that I'd like to talk to you all about is the current state of grouping. Now, we know by frequenting the forums, we're on Reddit, we're on other social media websites, and we understand that grouping didn't quite hit the mark. It's a little bit tedious to group. You get out of sync with your friends or other players. So we're going to fix those things. I agree, yes. We're going to fix those things. And the way we're going to fix those things is as follows. So number one, we're doing a game-wide audit of all the quests in the game, looking for quests that separate you from other players and your group mates. And like I said, we're going to fix them. While we're doing that, we're also going to add more shared advancement with the quests. And what that means is, say Wheels and Nick and Paul and myself, we're all in a group, and we have a quest to go and collect 5 foozles, or whatever it is. When Wheels goes and loots one of those items, we're all going to get shared credit for that, so we don't all have to loot them individually. In addition to that, when you join a group, we're going to make sure that we sync you to their channel. And the channel is something that the mega server technology uses to kind of load balance things. So we're going to make sure that when you join a group, you can play with them and see them. Another thing that we're going to do to improve grouping is we're going to update the journal and the quest tracker to show you which quests you have in common with your group mates, as well as how far ahead or behind you are in terms of quest progress. The last thing that I'm going to touch on with grouping is a confirmation dialog for quest sharing. And what that means is, say Gina shares a quest with me, she's going to know right away if I accepted it or if I declined it, and if I declined it, why I declined it. So that's just a few of the things we're working on. Keep in mind, not all of these things are going to come in overnight. They're going to take some time, and they're going to roll out over the next few updates. These things also aren't the only things we're working on for grouping. We're going to continue to monitor things, iterate, and continue to improve the experience as we continue on. The next thing I'd like to touch on a little bit is our new veteran dungeon that's coming online in Update 5. And that's the Veteran City of Ash. Now, a little bit of a spoiler for those of you who haven't played through the normal version yet, but in normal version, when you arrive, there's a Bosmer village on fire. And as you're progressing through the dungeon, you find out that there's a Daedric invasion going on here. And when you get to the very end, and you kind of push the invasion back to some degree, the leadership of the Bosmer village decide that the best way to put an end to this once and for all is to go into the portal and close it from the other side. So that's where the veteran version comes into play. When you go back there in veteran mode, the village elder hasn't returned yet. And so you're charged to go into this portal, go to the Deadlands, and figure out what the heck happened to her. Let's take a look at what things are looking like right now. So that's Veteran City of Ash. As I said, that's going to come online in Update 5. While I'm on the topic of dungeons, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the feedback that we hear from you pretty frequently. Probably the most common bit of feedback that we get is that you really wish that you didn't outlevel the dungeons so quickly. You know, it's a shame that, you know, after you've outleveled them, you can't really ever go back unless you go and play in the veteran mode. Another bit that we hear pretty frequently is some of you are still really struggling with solo instance difficulty. And so we're going to fix those things, and the way we're going to fix those is to implement dungeon scaling. So what that means is when dungeon scaling goes live, all solo and group instances are going to scale to your level, or your group leader's level. That includes any monsters in the dungeon, any item rewards, item drops, XP, gold. We're going to scale them up so you can play the way you need to play. In addition to that, solo instances are also going to monitor your progress and your performance. And if you're really struggling with a particular encounter, they're going to dynamically update the difficulty to make it a little bit easier for you to get through there, and so you're not punching your monitor in frustration. So another bit of feedback that we hear pretty frequently is you really wish there was a need or a desire to repeat dungeons. You know, once you get your items, you're kind of done and you're ready to move on. So, you know, dungeon scaling helps with that to some degree, but we can do more. And the way we're going to do more is we're going to leverage the Undaunted. We're going to add in a new daily dungeon quest, or a series of daily dungeon quests that we're calling pledges. And what we're going to do is take the Undaunted skill line, expand it out, add in a bunch of really cool new passives. And so when you're doing these daily dungeon quests or pledges, you're going to get a really good chunk of Undaunted XP to help you level up that skill line a little bit better, but you're also going to get these special keys. Now these keys are really cool because they open very unique treasure chests that are found in each of the Undaunted headquarters in your Alliance capitals. Inside these chests are some really, really powerful items that just look amazing. And if you don't believe me, when Jared comes up, he's going to show you some of these armors, and I think you're really going to get excited. They're awesome. So that's just a few of the things that we're working on in terms of dungeons. You know, Veteran City of Ash coming online in Update 5, and the dungeon scaling and the dungeon repeatability stuff will be coming on in an update soon. The last thing I'd like to touch on is Craglorn, the next chapter in the Craglorn storyline. So most of you, or a lot of you, have played through the first two chapters, and those focused in on the Mage and the Warrior Celestial. This third chapter centers around the Scaled Court, and you finally putting an end to them. Now, we learned a lot in building the first two chapters, especially in terms of itemization and the overall group experience. And so we've taken those lessons learned and put them into practice to really improve the overall quest experience here. In addition to the quest content in this chapter, we've also added in an all-new crafting trait for you crafters to learn. And we also have a brand new 12-person trial, and that's focused on the Serpent. And that will kind of tie the Celestial storyline off and put it in a nice, neat place. I've got a couple of videos here. Let's take a look at how things are shaping up. But wait, there's more. There we go. So, I know I promised that I would stop talking after the last little bit there, but I have one more thing to share, and that is the Dragon Star Arena. I know a lot of you got really excited over some of the interviews that Paul has been given recently, and I figured I would sneak this in at the end and kind of give you a really quick bit on what this is. So, we look at the Dragon Star Arena as essentially a mini trial. It's a 4-person test of skill. It's you and your group against a series of PvE encounters. And the better you perform, the further you progress. And the further you progress, the better and better the rewards are. Now, there's 2 difficulty modes in this arena. One is a normal mode, where you can kind of play at your own pace and learn without any restrictions. And in veteran mode, we crank the difficulty up to like 15. It's really freaking hard. And implemented some life restrictions and a leaderboard component for those of you that love that stuff. Let's take a look. So that's the Dragon Star Arena. We have had a ton of fun playtesting this internally. I can't tell you how much fun we've had. Just last week, Paul and I were in a group, and we were, it was about a 2-hour playtest in the zone, and we made a beeline straight to the Dragon Star Arena and spent 2 hours in there, getting slaughtered, killing things, just dying in unimaginable ways. It was a lot of fun. Though I have to admit, we only got to the 3rd or 4th arena in normal mode. And part of that, and Paul, I'm going to call you out here a little bit, but part of that is because our DPS kept dying in the fire. So for those of you out there, please, please, please make sure you pay attention to your surroundings. So that's it for me. Thank you, everybody. I really hope you got to enjoy some of the things I showed you all. And I'm going to pass it off to Jesse McIntyre. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Rich, and hello, everybody. Go to the next one of these, huh? All right, there we go. So I'm Jesse McIntyre. I'm ESO's lead client programmer. And there's a lot going on tech-wise at ZOS and on ESO, from new feature development to systems upgrades, bug fixes, performance and stability improvements. We work on all that stuff all the time. But I'm here today to tell you a little bit about something in specific, and that is an upgrade to our facial animation system. And I could just show you guys the kind of the before and after, and we can ooh-ah a little bit. But I thought it would be more fun to talk a little bit about the technology behind how the stuff works. And as a tech guy, that's the stuff that gets me excited. I think this one's particularly interesting. I think you'll enjoy it as well. But let's start with a look at the state of the game at present.
What makes tyrants do any of the things they do? Ambition? Glory? I certainly don't know. What I do know is that Montclair's forces have taken half the capital, and will soon take the rest of it unless the Shornhelm Guard gets some help.
Right. So what do we have here? We've got a character with one bone in the face for the jaw in specific, a couple bones to move the eyebrows. You saw a little expressiveness in there. But really, that gets you pretty much a sock puppet, right? So it's not really hitting the fidelity bar that we'd like it to. So we've been spending some time now with a small group of programmers and animators working on this upgrade. And at the core of it, the upgrade is powered by face effects. You've probably heard of it before. It's a technology we've licensed. It's in a lot of games. A lot of your favorite games most likely, but it focuses specifically on the facial animation part. And what I find most interesting is kind of how it works. What it does is it takes audio and text of the dialogue as input. It does a bunch of analysis on it offline, and it identifies phonemes, right, in the dialogue. And phonemes are the linguistic term for the individual sounds that we make in speech. And in English, there are exactly 44 of them. Sorry, one more here. And so what it does is it actually identifies those, right, in the dialogue. It creates a sequence of them, and then maps them to mouth shapes, which is what you're seeing here. And these aren't the mouth shapes of our characters in specific, but this is just like an artistic reference to give you an idea of what these things look like. And there are only a handful of them here, but in our game we have about 22 of them or so, 22, 24. Some of them do double duty when they're mapped from those phonemes to the mouth shapes. But effectively, they're representing them, right? So why is this interesting? Like, honestly, it's pretty fun to stare at these. I do it at work sometimes. It's a good time. So that's sort of one fun part of it. But the actual, the interesting part is, well, it's sort of twofold, right? It's how it mimics real life, which is the part I really like. I like when technology and real life converge a bit. And it's important that we kind of author them this way because of how our brains work, right? When we're watching somebody speak, whether it's somebody live or in film or in video games, your brain expects to see these mouth shapes occurring as you hear the speech, right? So think of like your favorite kung fu movie, with overdubbed dialogue, right? It just feels wrong when you're watching it, but you get used to it after a while, right? So that's okay. Or like you're streaming video off the internet, and it's a bad stream, so the audio's off a little bit, and at first you're like, hey, what's wrong? But then you quickly identify the fact that, those mouth shapes aren't actually matching up with what you're hearing, so it throws you off. So that's much of the importance of, using a technology like face effects to make things believable. So that's sort of like the base of the technology, right? But then there's a whole additional step, which is our artists and programmers working together to actually take our characters and create believable mouth shapes. So actually, we'll advance here one more. Actually, look at a fully formed character. This is one of our, I think this is probably the Breton male, but this is an example of kind of the extents they have to go to get these shapes right. And sort of it looks subtle here, but it actually, it's really important that these are shaped properly, like I was mentioning before. You notice when they're off just a little bit. And in particular, our game is really, is a little bit more complicated in that not only do we have a lot of dialogue, right? We have over 120,000 lines of dialogue translated into 3 languages, which is huge, right? I did a little research before this and identified that like your average feature-length film has something like 1,000 lines of dialogue. So think about the scale, right? And for that reason, we don't have the luxury of really going back and looking at the face effects output, and modifying it to get it to look exactly right. So our artists have had to spend a lot of time, getting these mouth shapes just right across all of our races and genders. And as you well know, we have the humanoid races, but then we also have the beast races, which have a very different facial structure. And so, they spend a lot of time focusing on those in particular. And then on top of that, as you're probably also aware, we have a really robust character creation system. And part of that allows you to modify the face, which also modifies the facial structure underneath the hood. So, so they also have to take that into account when they're authoring these things. And you've probably noticed running around in the world, but not every Breton male looks like a Breton male, or Khajiit looks like the same Khajiit next to him, right? Our content developers have those same tools you do in the character creator to change the structure of the face. So they need to take all of those structural modifications into account as they go. So it's actually a really complicated process, but I think the results are beautiful. And while this is very much a work in progress, I think it's coming along really well. So let's take a look at that before and after.
They don't think we need the Dominion to survive. They think the Queen is making a mistake, elevating the Bosmer and Khajiit to be equals with the High Elves. Racists, isolationists, and general idiots.
What makes tyrants do any of the things they do? Ambition? Glory? I certainly don't know. What I do know is that Montclair's forces have taken half the capital, and will soon take the rest of it unless the Shornhelm Guard gets some help.
Betrayal. She turns against her people after years of service, and she spoke of my betrayal? She obviously could not be trusted. But you have proven your worth.
So there you go. So again, yeah, so again, it's very much a work in progress, but it's looking beautiful. And it looks nice on the screen, but it really makes a difference when you're playing the game, right? The immersiveness of your interaction with NPCs, it's a significant improvement. And it gets me really excited both to play and develop the game. This stuff is why I love coming to work, right? So yeah, thank you very much for listening. I should call out just once more that this is one of a myriad of technical modifications and improvements we make behind the scenes, and we look forward to continuing to do so. So thanks a lot for listening. Next up, we have Paul Sage.
Thank you, Jesse. Hi, everyone. So today, I get to talk about a lot of different things. The first thing I want to talk about is this stage. So I don't know how it is out there, but you have to pay $75 at Six Flags to get on a ride like being on the subwoofer up here. Wow. It's pretty startling. All right, let's go ahead. So what I wanted to open up with today is the veteran gameplay. And by veteran gameplay, what I mean is anything you do post level 50. And so one of the great things about working on an MMO, one of the things that I really enjoy is a situation like this. It's being here with the community. When we ship the game doesn't stop. We're constantly working with you, the community, to improve the game. We're getting your feedback. That's one of the best things about being an MMO developer. And so that means that with the veteran system, what we've done is we've tried to get a lot of your feedback, a lot of the things that you've said. So let's talk about what's working in the game right now. So one of the things that we've gotten as a data point is that you actually really like being able to keep your same character and go into the other alliances. You've built up a lot of the relationship, the choices you've made with your character, makes it really fun. But then, the next thing that we've said that, hey, what is it you like? And it's, you like to keep growing with items. You like to keep getting new items. That's really fun. The item chase is fun, so that's good. And we're working to constantly improve our items. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the patch notes, but we've been working on the items, putting in new sets. It's going to be really good. The third thing, and probably the most contentious, that we've gotten feedback on is the challenge. So let's talk about the challenge post level 50, because here it is where we split between you. There are those people who really love the challenge that is after level 50, and those people who feel it is too difficult. And really what it comes down to isn't just whether it's too difficult, it's what is it post level 50? Does it ramp up in a predictable pattern? And so that's one of the first things we looked at, which is after you come off of level 50 and you've defeated a Daedric prince like Molag Bal, you don't want a skeever running off with half your arm down the alleyway, right? So there's a challenge that you actually have to ramp up to. And so that's one of the first things we identified is this is something we need to work on for the veteran system. One of the second things we want to work on, infrequent reward. So when you work on games, one of the things you know is that you know that there's random reward mechanisms or reinforcement mechanisms. Those are the things when you're out in the world, you're killing monsters, you're killing people, you're doing all the things you should be doing, you're looting treasure chests, you find new items and goods. And you never know what you're going to find. That's a surprise to you. So that's what we call a reinforcement reward. But what about the predictable reward path? That is involving things like your character growth, right? Those are the things that you see and you say, okay, I want new abilities. And right now we have a really good progression system put in place, but by the time people reach level 50, they're at the place where they're like, well, I've got a lot of the skills I'm using right now. I've kind of maxed them out. I'm maxing out like a lot of the armor skills, the weapon skills, and those things. So what is it I'm going to do? So that was the second thing we kind of identified that we wanted to touch upon. And the third thing we identified was that the experience was too different. So you go from level 1 to level 50, and you're gaining experience points. You're out killing monsters, you're out exploring the world again, and that's how you gain experience. But then we introduced this thing called veteran ranks. And veteran ranks were a way to get you to, keep progressing in the game. But what happened is we also introduced something called veteran points. And you gained veteran points through very different mechanisms than you gained experience points, but sometimes it was similar. And what ended up happening was, for instance, you could gain veteran points going in doing dungeon achievements or becoming emperor. But then with experience points, you got them for doing things like discovering, and sometimes the two met and sometimes they didn't, and it became a little too confusing. So that experience was just too different. And so that was the third thing we wanted to work on. And so what are we coming up with? Well, we're actually coming up with a system, but we're going to introduce that system into 4 phases. And the reason is because we want to get these improvements to you as quickly as possible, as smartly as possible, and in the right way. And one of them you've probably already seen active, and that is we reduced the difficulty in the veteran zones. And the reason, again, we did that is because we wanted to ramp people up in a more predictable manner. Now, there's a lot of challenge still available to you in the trials, in the upcoming Dragonstar Arena, where apparently Rich pointed out that I failed. But that's the first phase of this. Now, the second phase, which we'll show you in here in a very helpful color chart, is the fact that we're going to get rid of veteran points. And so veteran points are actually going to or veteran ranks rather, are going to be gained through experience point gain. And that means that instead of going through and having to worry about whether you're gaining veteran points in this way, you'll have a very predictable path and actually a faster path through your veteran ranks. And that's the second phase. And also coming in that phase, and very important, is the fact that you'll get bonus experience. So this is very much, if you haven't played for a while, say you haven't played for 20 hours or something like that, you'll get a bonus to the experience gains you get. And the reason we're doing this is to help you keep in sync with people or your friends that might play more than you do. So we're adding a bonus for those people who don't play as frequently and gain experience. And so you'll be seeing this bonus come up with this next experience point increase here. And that brings me to phase number 3, which is really the start of the introduction of the champion system. So as we talked about this problem I brought up, which was the predictable growth of your character, and how do you keep investing in your character? What's going to keep you entertained, each hour trying to improve your character? And really that's the cadence we're trying to hit, is getting you in to where at every hour you're trying to do something useful for your character. And that comes in these passives. And we're going to introduce a lot of new passives. But if only we could introduce these passives in a way that felt fictionally consistent with the Elder Scrolls universe. And so what you're seeing here is the tower constellation. And so imagine, if you will, that you pull up a user interface element and you can see the different passives on this. And you could go in, and as you gained experience, you would get what we call champion points. And the champion points could be spent to increase the bonuses or the passives that you have. And what would some of those passives look like? Well, imagine, and now these things are likely to change, so if anybody who's watching the live stream or here at QuakeCon says these, I guaranteed these, I did not. These are likely to change over the course of development. Rich might have guaranteed them, I did not. So the Blade Expert here, as an example, might allow you to increase the base damage you can do with blades. You might have Tenacity, which allows you to increase your stamina regen. right? And the really nice thing about this is you're going to be able to keep putting points in these to increase them by percentages. At first, the percentages may seem small, but in aggregate, they'll grow over time, and you'll really start to customize the character in the way you want. And these bonuses won't just apply to one character. The bonuses, or those champion points you earn, you'll actually earn them for all of your characters. So this is going to be an account-wide system. Once you earn champion points, you'll be able to spend them on all of your characters. Now, what is the significance of putting them in these constellations or these paths? Because there's going to be several of them. Well, the significance is that the more of these points you spend in any one path, you'll actually unlock other passives. So for instance, if you're really bad at picking locks on treasure chests like Nick is, then you might need this impatience bonus, which gives you a significant increase to your chance of success for forcing locks. Or you might be able to say, get more gold found in chests. So these nice little bonuses will keep adding up for your character to keep improving your experience over time. All right, but really that was kind of a bunch of words. What would this actually look like in game? What would we see if this was going in? And now we might see that you have 8 champion points to spend. Here are the constellations you can spend it on. And now you'll see that I have the apprentice. I've already spent 9 points in the apprentice. And maybe I'll pick that passive, maybe spell shield instead. And when I spend that final point, I'll unlock one of those other passives that I have available to me. All right, so that's just a brief introduction as to what the user interface will look like for something like the champion system, which is an aggregate system improving your character. The fourth phase of this is introducing new gear that'll be available to you in a slightly different way. Right now, when you get gear, you have a limit on what you can equip, right? And that could be the veteran rank limit. We actually want to eliminate that because we want your gear to be meaningful to you, yet still not separate you from other players, right? So, you heard Rich talk about making sure that you could keep playing with other people in an easier method, and that's what we want to introduce. So we're going to introduce a system whereby the new weapons, the new armor, the new items you get in the game are going to come in with the new content. You might even think of this like seasons. And these new weapons will actually be available in any one given season. So if we introduce Imperial City, as an example, we might introduce new weapons. And the rarity of those weapons, the availability of them in Imperial City is what's going to keep those a little bit more rare. Now, any content that was released before Imperial City with these champion weapons or armor or items, that content is actually going to have been around longer. They're going to be in the economy more. And we might even sell those items directly to players. And what that enables us to do is it says nobody is going to fall behind the item chase, but there's still going to be an item chase. So again, that's just a sneak peek at the champion system that's coming out. So there you go. So that's how we're going to address making sure that there is still a really meaningful system after level 50. Okay, so one of the other things that's really fun about being a developer is, of course, we get to create those systems whereby it's very scripted. You get to go on quests. The quests are really fun. But what's really entertaining is to set up those systems, excuse me, where we don't know what you're going to do, where the game acts more like a simulation, where if you go into the game, you see these NPCs, you see things, you see situations that you can act upon, and the game reacts to what you do. And that's why I'm excited about this system, which is the justice system. It's all about emergent gameplay and the way in which you're going to act with the game. Let's see what that's going to look like. Okay, so as normal, you could come in and just take this gear in the game right now. Except now, for the first time, you'll be stealing these items. I'm doing a pretty good job right now. And instead of the items not having any value, they'll actually have value if they're stolen. But to sell those items, you're going to have to find fences around the city. And of course, you want to make sure that you're hidden, nobody else can see you, nobody can witness the crime of you stealing.
Stop! Thief! That isn't yours. Now hand it over.
Now you can see that a guard will now accost you if you steal, and you'll be able to pay your bounty. So,
You'd best be moving along.
Indeed I should. So I'll be able to pay my bounty, and it'll clear everything of my crimes, but it'll also clear all the stolen goods that I've taken. Now, stealing's only part of the miscreant activity which we encourage our players to involve themselves in.
Someone help!
So we would like to encourage everybody to start killing NPCs in the game. I think a little murder spree's in order. Oh, even the clergy's not safe. Oh.
Stop right there, criminal scum.
All right. Now I can't afford to pay my bounty. Oh boy.
Prepare to die.
Oh. Well, that was okay, but I know you guys. You're going to find ways to get around that guard. You're going to find ways to do things that we probably don't expect. So what's fun about this being an online game is that you aren't going to just have to be the establishment character, but you're also going to be able to be guards. You're going to be able to go in to find those characters who haven't paid their bounties, who've been on these killing rampages, and you're going to be able to enact your own justice. So that's right, there's going to be an active PvP. That's right, it's active PvP in the world. It's just turning the game over to you in ways that I really like. So with that, that's just a brief introduction of the justice system. I'm going to turn this over to Nick Kronkle, who's going to talk about one of my other favorites upcoming, which is spellcrafting. So thanks a lot, y'all.
Hello, friends. I know we all said that, but I just wanted to do that too. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the spellcrafting system. My name is Nick Kronkle. I'm the lead gameplay designer for ESO. And thank you. Spellcrafting is a system that a lot of people have been asking about for a pretty long time. It was a big favorite of everyone in Elder Scrolls Oblivion. And it's safe to say that it's something that's really exciting because it allows so much flexibility and creativity for your builds and your characters. Now, spellcrafting is what it sounds like. You're going to be able to find and combine various effects from spells in the game, some of which will look very familiar, and create new abilities that you can put on your hotbar and permanently have part of your character. And you can have a hotbar full of entirely spellcrafting abilities. You can mix and match them with weapon skills or class skills, but there's just a lot of flexibility that will be added to the game as a result of it. And pretty much the first thing that everyone says to me when I encounter you guys, wherever it is, in the elevator, or on the taxi, in the airport, is that, yeah, it sounds pretty awesome to go ahead and be able to make whatever ability I want, but the first thing I'm going to do is make a 50-meter AoE stun that does a life drain and basically unbalances the game and will make it completely unfun. And so I'm going to go into a good deal of detail about how this system works and how you'll be able to have a great deal of flexibility in the spells that you make and can be creative in that way, while also being in a bounded system that isn't completely unbalancing to the game. So for starters, I'm going to talk about how the system is introduced. For those of you who've been playing the game, there's a quest line associated with the Mages Guild, and part of what you're doing for that quest line is recovering this island refuge that takes place called Ivea. And that refuge is a location for mages to go ahead and study and do research and have a greater understanding of magic. And having completed this quest line, you've really unleashed the researching might of the mages in the Tamriel. And one of the first things they discover is these ancient doorways that are hidden throughout the world that belong to some culture that no one's seen before. But what's interesting about them is, in some places, they seem to be intentionally part of these ruins. And in other places, they're kind of scattered about randomly, and that's part of the mystery of them that you'll be uncovering as part of it. What's particularly compelling about it is when these researchers discover the doorways, they seem to have hints about this new way of organizing magic into schools that no one in our time has seen before. But they should look pretty familiar to all you guys. And there'll be a sort of spells, again, that no one has seen before, and a lot of opportunities to discover new types of magic. So of course the researchers are super excited about it, and they'll be tasking you to go and find those doorways. And the act of doing that looks something like this. So you chase that little ball of light, it'll go all the way across the world. It'll cross bridges, mountains, it'll go on forever and ever. And it's a little faster than you, so you got to chase it. But it's no big deal if it gets away, because you can just recast it. It costs magicka. And when it eventually finds its end location, you'll see these doorways that can only be revealed by people who have this spell and were never seen before this point. And they take you into these ancient classrooms. And they're a little run down because they've been around for a pretty darn long time. But in the middle of them is these tablets, these rune tablets. And they contain inscriptions in a language that's familiar to those of you who are familiar with the enchanting language from the crafting system. And this tablet, for example, is completely pristine. It's unbroken, but it's not always going to be that easy. You know, these things are going to be worn down, broken, and scattered all throughout the world. And it's part of your job to find the complete inscription and be able to replicate it yourself so that you can learn the underlying magic beneath it. And that looks a little something like this. This is an interactive UI similar to how lockpicking works, where you're actually just going to go ahead and use the tried and true message of charcoal and paper to recreate this spell. And collect it. And like I said, it's not always going to be 3 pieces like that. Sometimes it'll be broken into 2, sometimes 5, and sometimes maybe you'll be lucky enough to come across a pristine one. And it all depends on the spell that you're trying to hunt down. So there's a lot of exploration in the system and a lot of sort of discovery and intrigue. And when you do collect these papers, you would throw them into this portfolio that you're collecting over time. And as you discover different parts of different characters as part of the language, it's going to give you hints about what those spells might be. So this, for example, is Conjure Flame Adronach from the Conjuration School. And this is Lightning Bolt from the Destruction School. There are many, many spells like this in the game, and there'll, of course, be familiar spells from previous Elder Scrolls games. And over time, you're going to want to collect many of them, and it will take quite a while because the doors are well hidden, and it should take a good amount of exploration and research. But that's just the first part of the actual spellcrafting system. This just gets you to the door. And what you want to do when you've actually found one of these spells in order to harness that magic yourself is recreate the tablet that you found in these ancient classrooms. And you want to make one for yourself. And the UI for that will look something similar to this. This is a temp UI, but it'll give you the basics. So the first thing you do is collect the base effect of the spell, like we've been talking about up to this point, and that's an exploration and research game. But when you actually know one, you can customize it in one of these 6 ways, which we call a focus, and they're similar to morphs. So for example, if you put the AoE morph on Lightning Bolt, you're going to create a chain lightning spell. Or if you put the AoE morph on the Conjure Flame Atronach, it's going to run around with a fire aura. Or you can put the enduring focus on the Flame Atronach, and then it'll be a permanent pet, like a sorcerer, rather than a temporary one. And any ability can be focused in any one of these 6 ways. You can make an ultimate out of any single one of these spells, as much customization as you want out of that. You can give it a cast time for a bonus effect. You can reduce the cost and make efficient spells. And there's a whole variety of things that you do in that way to customize the effect itself, just beyond what it does by default. And that's the second part. The third part is actually the tablet itself. So you can see the one there is is this kind of stone, worn down tablet that isn't particularly attractive. But there's plenty of other ones out there in the world, marble, runestone, things that are a little more high-end material. And the higher end material you use to create one of these spells, the more powerful and the more expensive it will be. So there's kind of a trade-off there in terms of what kind of power you're going to get out of the spell and how much you're willing to have it cost. Now this is bounded, so you can't just create a single spell that costs all your magical pool but kills someone in one hit, but there is a good deal of flexibility there in terms of trying to make something that is the right mix of exactly the sorts of spells you want. So there's 3 different avenues of customization for every single spell that you find, of which there are many. It's a hugely open and flexible system. I really have no idea what everyone's going to do when they get their hands on it, but I'm really excited to see how these builds sort of affect the metagame. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that you will probably use this to murder innocents. So. And that's just the first part of the system, which I think up to this point, it's pretty exciting, but it's all been about the crafting of the spell itself. There's a lot of different elements to that about exploration and about deciding exactly what you want. And I certainly expect different sort of spell crafters to be known for the different things they can make, because it is quite a challenge to actually find all the different spells. But the system itself is social. So when you do create that tablet, it isn't just me that can use it. You can trade it. You can sell it on the guild store. You can give it to your friend if you have friends that are that nice to you. I certainly don't. And you can do whatever you want for it. And especially, I think, when the system first comes out and a spell is brand new, there'll be some really interesting demand rising from some of the most popular spells that I think everyone will want. But when you do get one of these tablets, if you're lucky enough, you can consume it anywhere in the world. And it looks a little something like this. So that would be learning a lightning spell. And that would be learning an ice spell, both from the destruction tree. Now, every spell that you can learn from any school will have a unique effect associated with the School of Magic. And at that point, the spell is permanently added to your library of spells. You can cast it, you can put it on your hotbar, you can put it on a backup slot, or you can not use it at all if you want to for whatever reason. And if it's the first spell that you learn from, say, the Destruction School, then you'll actually get that skill line. And in the normal way, if you put this ability on your bar and gain experience and use it, then you'll be advancing your Destruction skill line, which has its own passives with it, so you can become a master of Destruction magic, fire magic, or whatever else you're really interested in doing that, maybe is something that you've really wanted to be able to do in all the Elder Scrolls game. It's a build that, that you've really wished you could make happen, but haven't been able to up to this point. I'm going to go ahead and give you a few more examples of the spells we're creating in this way, just to sort of tease it, but this is certainly not the full set. So that's Oak Flesh from the Alteration School. It's pretty cool. Wait for it. That's Muffle from the Illusion School. That'll make you very, very difficult to detect. Conjure Flame Atronach. Conjure Familiar. And that's Ice Cloak, the first two from the Conjuration School and the latter from Destruction. So a lot of these spells, of course, are going to be familiar, and there's many, many more that are available for you to unlock. And it's worth noting that every single one that you come across, all of those spells, all can be customized with any of the 6 focuses and with any of the different tablets you can find. So really, you can make a build entirely out of spellcrafting spells. You could mix and match however you want to. You can find Restoration. You can find Destruction. And it should be really exciting to see how that all develops. We really value a whole lot of flexibility and creativity out of a progression system, and I feel like this is really taking it to the next level, unbounded, and keep it open-ended so that we can see what sort of creative things you guys do. So that's all I have for the spellcrafting system. I really appreciate you guys listening, and with that, I'll hand it off to Jared Carr.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, guys. I'm Jared. I'm the art director. Hello. I'm gonna cover several topics. First, I'm gonna talk about combat responsiveness, and touch on some animation work that we're doing. And then I'm gonna give you a preview of some armors and weapons that you can expect to see rolled out over coming updates. And then we're gonna reveal 2 new zones that we're working on. And I also want to take this opportunity to say thank you very much to our players. We appreciate you, we appreciate your support, and we appreciate your feedback. And your feedback helps us prioritize what we're working on, as I think you can see from what Rich talked about and what Paul was talking about, all the stuff that we're doing. So it's in that spirit that I want to talk about combat. And combat responsiveness, I mean, we all play games, we know what this is. When I press a button, I have an expectation, and if the thing that I'm expecting doesn't happen, I'm frustrated, it doesn't feel good. Here's a chart which sort of shows all the systems and subsystems and factors that goes into a game feeling good, feeling responsive. And if something is missing, if effects assets are dropping out, or if there's lag, or even if an NPC doesn't impact the way I feel it should, it doesn't feel quite right. So I've gathered some actual feedback from our forums and from places like Reddit. We have some quotes, and I just want to sort of address a few topics directly. So in this player's feedback, it's dealing directly with button responsiveness, which is sort of what I just mentioned, which is I press a button, I expect something to happen, I expect a feedback in my UI, I expect an immediate action. And so we're looking across the board at a number of types of things. Small things like when I'm out of magic or stamina resources, I need that audio cue to hear that's happening. I don't always see the bar. We're also looking at the quick slot, so consuming potions, and those kinds of things where when you hit Q, you're in combat, you really need to know that you consume that potion. So these things sound like small things, but it adds up to the experience. We've put together a team of engineers that's dedicated specifically to these kinds of issues. And it's an ongoing process for us. Another example is I play a Nightblade, and there was a point in time where I was hitting abilities, and those abilities for some reason were locking out. I was at a Dark Anchor, I died. We've addressed those issues, as well as a lot of other bugs. But through this process, we determined that we didn't have quite the diagnostic tools that we needed. And so we've implemented some better diagnostic tools for our QA department, and we're going through additional testing now. Animation timing. So this player is touching on there's some sluggishness with some of the abilities, and the best example, I think, is the staff. So when you do a light attack or a heavy attack, there's a bit of a delay in that. It doesn't feel as responsive as it ought to. We traded, I think, a little bit of drama for responsiveness. So there's a big wind up and stuff. And so what we're doing right now is we're going back through all the weapon sets, starting with the mouse activities, the light attack, the heavy attack, block and interrupt, and speeding those up so that there's a much more instant feel to it. So it just feels tighter. And in the process of doing that, we are polishing up some animations so that the arcs of motion are smoother and the velocity feels better. And additionally, addressing some poses so that we can make some aesthetic improvements to poses. So right now, when you have a staff, you're really crouched down, and we want that to be more upright and tighter and faster, so it looks a little bit more realistic. Effects. So this player is making a comment about effects dropping out, and I assume this is mostly in high-density combat situations, PvP dungeons, where a lot of stuff is going on. So thank you, Corn Muffin 87. So there's a few things to cover here. We're allocating more of the budget the overall effects budget to combat particle effects specifically so that more renders on screen. And we're adding in a priority culling system. So what this means is there are effects that I care about more than others. And I want those guaranteed to be on screen so that they don't drop out. Because if I miss an effects cue, it could cause me to, well, die. So we start with my abilities are most important, as are my enemy's abilities on me. I have to see that. It tiers down to the group, and then beyond that. But we're taking this a step further. We're going to put these groupings into the UI so that you can toggle them on and off. We are adding in an overall effects budget slider. So if you're on a lower spec machine, you can actually lower that, that memory. And then we're also adding in a radius that you can adjust for the distance at which effects will draw. And so all of these things combined with a priority system and these controls should ensure that effects don't drop out. And lastly, we're pre-caching all combat telegraphs to make sure that they're always in memory and therefore always play, because those are critical to your experience. And weapon swapping. In Update 3, weapon swapping is now instant and overrides all other combat actions. So there you go. Armor and weapons. So this is the Kathringi, and this is an armor set that's going to be dropped with one of the zones that I'm going to show you in a second. And the Kathringi is an ancient race that at our time period is pretty much all wiped out. And if you know your lore, you know that they're the silver-skinned people. They're a tribal culture that basically lives naked. They don't wear clothes. And the issue here is that nudity is difficult to itemize. So we took some liberties and designed this set. These would be Kathringi ceremonial armors and weapons. Here's some designs based on the Morag Tong from Morrowind. And these are grouped. The two on the left side of the screen, there's a light pant and a light robe. That's the light set. We just break it out like that so that we can see both. And then the medium and the heavy. And weapons. Dark Brotherhood. And weapons. Thieves Guild. And weapons. Glass armors. And their weapons. And this is a set of high-level PvP Alliance-themed gear for the Ebonheart Pact. And we'll do all three sets for all three alliances. And this is the Undaunted. So earlier, Rich was talking about the Undaunted skill lines and what we're doing with that, and he was mentioning the treasure chest. So these would be the first items that you would find through those activities. But the team was talking, and we wanted to take this a step further. So we like the idea that if you're running through the dungeon and killing a boss, killing a difficult boss, you should be able to essentially skin it and wear it. And so there's a Daedra. Grievous Twilight. Spider Daedra. Dwemer Spider. And the Harvester. And just some behind-the-scenes stuff. This is a ZBrush model of that Harvester shoulder pad and the helm in a second. ZBrush is a digital sculpting tool that we use. Obviously, these aren't final textures or anything like that, but it's looking cool so far. Here are the glass armors. So this would be the glass heavy ZBrush sculpt. And the medium. And this is the Imperial Daedric medium. And these would be released with the Imperial City content. And that's the heavy. And here's some Dwemer armor in-game. The heavy. And the light. And here's that Imperial heavy, Imperial Daedric heavy in-game. All right, so the first zone I'm going to talk about is an adventure zone. It's called Murkmire. And like Craglorn, it supports 4-man group content in the Overland and in Delves and 12-man trials. Murkmire is a province of Blackmarsh. It's in the southeast, under Shadowfen there. And when we begin designing a zone, we do a simple map and we sort of decide, well, what are the biomes going to be like? So in the north here, there's swamp, kind of verdant green swamp, and then in the middle, there's kind of an upland area as it heads towards Cyrodiil, and then in the bottom, it's a bog, kind of nasty, moody. And the dominant culture is Argonian, and we're doing another sort of architecture set, and this is just a quick sample of what this stuff is looking like. Here's a prop set. We concept everything, and our goal is to develop a world that looks, looks real and looks like it's lived in, and it's believable. But we'll be introducing a new non-player character race called the Naga. These guys are pretty cool. Here's the ZBrush sculpt of his head. He's a happy guy. And this is a new drag variant for Murkmire. And this guy I like a lot. He's a turtle, but he's a really big turtle, and he's fast. And he breathes fire. Because everybody likes fire-breathing reptiles. So, this is the Argonian behemoth. He's quite large, and I think he likes to eat naga. So, here's some paintings, and this is where sort of all the parts and pieces come together. Here's the architecture in the zone. The Argonians, their civilization is in decline. At one point, they had temples, architecture, but since then, it's been sort of swallowed by the swamp. So there's all these ruins dotting the landscape. And at this point in time, they're pretty much relegated to living in more primitive conditions. This would be that upland area headed towards Cyrodiil. More forest and swamp. And here's a shot of the bog, a little moodier, a little nastier. And some in-game footage. So this is how it's coming together. This is under sort of a simple lighting condition. Obviously, we have time of day systems and weather systems, and so the trees will animate and all that, but this is looking really great. More animated plants, a lot of carnivorous plants in this zone. You can see the fly traps there, and there's the behemoth posing for you. All right, and so, yeah. So the other zone I wanted to show is a solo PvE zone. It's Hrothgar, and anyone from any alliance can go to this zone. Hrothgar is in the north. It's between High Rock and Skyrim. And Hrothgar, the backstory here is that Hrothgar was given to the orcs in their deal when they joined the Daggerfall Covenant. And this is important to them because their ancestral capital, Orsinium, is in this province. And that's the sort of black mountain there is where Orsinium would be. And what's happening in this zone is the followers of the Code of Malakath are distrustful of the Orc King Kurog and his Daggerfall Covenant allies because it was their ancestors, the Bretons and the Redguard, who destroyed Orsinium. And simultaneously, King Kurog is sympathetic to a sect of Trinimac worshippers. And they want to do away with the Code of Malakath. And so it's against this political backdrop that you will help rebuild Orsinium. This is Orsinium here. And thereby influence the future of the Orc people. Here's a shrine to Malakath in the wilderness. Here's a set of statues that you'd find in Orsinium. They're based off of an Orc armor set that will release with the zone, which you might find in a dungeon like this. And no zone is complete without ambient creatures. This is the Chubloon. And a Horker. Give it up for the Horker, ladies and gentlemen. We save on polygons with only the one tusk. And a female giant. So I think it's important to add depth to the characters in the game by adding, having both male and female variants for the monsters. And instead of having a group of males and a group of females. So wanted to add a tough sort of matriarch giantess. And here she is in game. So, here, right. And I guess here's a couple of ogres looking for their companions. This is in the tundra of Hrothgar beneath Orsinium. And here's Orsinium itself. And this is a work in progress. We're still in production on this, but wanted to show this to you because it's pretty cool. We're spending more time on developing more organic cities so that it really sells the idea that this is a place that was built up over time and provides a lot more interesting areas for exploration. And it also looks really, really cool. Up at the top there would be King Kurog's throne room, which you can get to. And we're really excited about this. The team has done a fantastic job. And there you go. I think Matt has some closing comments for us. Here he comes. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jared. What you've seen today is obviously a lot of in-depth information on systems that we've been working on. I just want to say, obviously, a lot of these systems are going to have to go through testing. They're going to go on a playtest server. Some of them may change. So this is as we stand today, this is how the systems work. Obviously, as you see from the justice system, there's absolutely no way that could ever be exploited. So it will work. Even with the player guards, we're still going to have to do a lot of work to make sure. But this just basically shows what we're doing to make the game better. MMOs evolve from the moment they launch until forever. So this just kind of shows the evolution of the game, where we're taking different systems. And as some of the panel members said, I can't stress this enough, we can't do this without you guys, because this is where we get the information about where you want the game to go. So almost every one of these systems that we've done were discussed in detail on many internet boards, on our forums, on Reddit, direct feedback to us. So if you see things here that we've talked about, that you talked about on forums and on the internet, this is how we do it. So thank you guys so much for being a part of the community, because Because really, it doesn't matter how many cool things you see up here on stage and in the game without other people in the game. It's just not the same. So thanks a lot, guys. We're going to go into a Q&A here where we're taking questions live from our Twitch feed. And we have Gina and Jessica over there from our community team who have been who have been moderating the discussion while this has been going on. So we thank them a lot for doing that. And they are going to do questions, and I think they're going to ask the questions. They have a mic, and then I'll pick who's going to answer. So we will go ahead and get started with that.
All right. Is it on? Yeah. Hi, folks. So we're going to go back and forth. We have a series of questions. We pulled some earlier, and we also have some that we've been pulling from the Twitch stream during this panel. So, without further ado, Gina, you want to take the first one? All right.
Okay, so this first question is from the forums. It's from forum user Taz. He asks, werewolves are in need of updates. It would be nice to see their form as a toggle to feel more beastly. Are there changes in the works for werewolves? And if so, can we get an idea of what they might be?
Who wants the werewolf question? I say Nick takes that. Go ahead, Nick.
Yes, absolutely. There's some changes in mind, and there's basically two phases of them. So for starters, we've received a lot of the feedback that people have been giving, basically saying that the ability is too expensive and not powerful enough for the amount it costs, and also it just doesn't last long enough to sort of really give you that satisfying feel that you want, to turn into a beast and start wrecking face. So the first phase of the update is really just going to be to bring those things in balance, basically increasing the damage, decreasing the cost, increasing the duration, making it just sort of a holdover solution so that it's more viable immediately. And then the second phase is we really feel like it needs a lot more breadth of abilities. Right now you can basically do a fear and a pounce, and that doesn't let you sort of take advantage of defensive abilities or self-heals or utility type spells. So we're going to be doing a pass to add several more active abilities to the tree so that when you turn into a werewolf you have a lot more options in addition to just being sort of in possession of more raw power. So those two things will be coming out fairly soon. Certainly the first phase very quickly, and then the second one as soon as we can follow after that.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, so I've got an easy one for you. This is from Ringading92. He wants to know who's the old man that appeared in the spellcrafting presentation.
I guess I'll just answer that too. Hi guys, hope you're not sick of me. The answer to that is a special stonemason that the spellcrafting, the Mages Guild has conscripted to go ahead and make these for you. There's some lore surrounding him, so I don't want to spoil it. But I will say that you actually can get that costume and look like him too, so that's pretty cool.
This next question is something we've seen come up a few times recently. Will we ever see more character customization options like a barbershop? And that's from the guild, The Art of Warfare.
I think Paul or Jared should take that. I think Paul will take that one.
I mean, I know, Jared, if you don't mind me saying, I know Jared feels really strongly about this. They've actually been working on a lot of different customization options for players. So I think really the way we introduce it is going to be extremely important. And, kind of off the cuff, and again, like Matt said, anything is liable to change. The way I'd like to see this introduced is more of an RP mechanic where players can earn these and give them to each other. I think that's really a fun thing for people to be able to do. And so, that's something that we're working on. But I know the artists already have lots more customization options. So absolutely it's coming. It's just a matter of how and when.
All right, Gina.
Oh, so many to choose from. All right, so we had a lot of really good questions come out of the justice system presentation. This one's from GamerGuy11B from our Twitch chat. Is the offender caught stealing placed on a timer? Meaning, how long is he or she open to attack from other players in the cities, towns, etc. if caught?
So we have what we call the KOS system. I mean, that's an internal name. It means kill on sight. And you saw the bounty. So the more bad things you do, whatever those bad things might be, add to your bounty cost. And eventually, you get into a state where your bounty is so high, you're just considered a kill on sight. And until you pay off your bounty, you're actually going to remain kill on site for a little bit. Now that may change as we're in development, but that's basically the crux of it. So we don't want you flip-flopping a lot, and the reason is when you have players who can enact justice, we don't want some weird timer going off in the middle of them fighting you where you suddenly are no longer KOS, and that becomes a weird situation. So I would say that if you're going to be a criminal, you're going to have to pay the cost.
This is from forum user Seismic. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. He asks, why do some quests get broken from one patch to another?
Yeah, that's a great question. Rich, you want to take that one?
Sure, I can take that. The real reason there is there's just a ton of moving parts. When we go and fix, a quest in one area by, adding in or adjusting, a particle effect somewhere, it's not necessarily always going to work either every time, or it's not always going to work under certain cases, under certain load. And so we do our best to make sure we don't break anything when we're fixing them. And QA does a great job to help us out with that, but sometimes that stuff slips through. And we always remedy that as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah, I think it definitely comes down to people play the game, especially in online games, much differently than we think they are. And a lot of those cases are from just players finding imaginative ways to break the quest system without knowing it. So, but those problems have gone way down over time, so they're few and far between now.
All right, so the Bluebird from our Twitch chat also would love to know, after seeing that facial animation presentation, when are they going to see it?
Sorry, would you repeat the question? I didn't hear you. I just heard facial animation.
When is it going to be?
They love the facial animation presentation. They're really excited to know roughly when can they look forward to seeing that in the game.
It's really unknown at this point. We're past the point, as you saw in the presentation, where the technology is working. At this point, it's more of a production issue, right? That when I was mentioning the 120,000 some odd lines of dialogue, 3 languages, there's a lot of scale to actually doing all of the face effects processing, validating it all through QA. And that's probably months of additional work, just making sure that when it does finally come out, it's looking as good or better than what you saw there across the entire game. So at this point, we really can't commit to a time period. It's kind of once we get past that large production point. But I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Okay, next question is from forum user Hassel Hoffman. He asks, do you plan on implementing a dueling feature for 1-versus-1 oriented subscribers that like PvP but don't care for the huge epic war that Cyrodiil is?
Paul, take that one.
All right, so dueling, a very popular question, and one we want to address. A dueling system sounds very simple, but it's not always very simple, and the reason is because can other players join in? How do you prevent them from joining in? Under what circumstances are you able to invite people? How do you not annoy people? That's one of the, there's a lot of things to consider. I think when we have the justice system fully in place, then we will have the tools necessary just by having that system in place to which we can look at getting dueling in. We're certainly not against dueling. We think it's a fun activity. It's just a matter of when we can get it in the game.
Got one from Erlex here in chat that I am desperately trying to scroll up and read. One sec. Okay, from Erlex. What are we doing to make PvP more meaningful in the future? Brian?
What are the future plans for the PvP system? Mr. Wheeler. It's right there.
Nothing. No, just kidding. That's just wrong. So you saw Imperial cities coming into play, and that's something that people have been asking for a while. And that is actually a space that you can actually say, this is mine now, it's not yours, and kick you out. It's not just one keep, it's an actual very important zone that's now yours. That's something that players have asked for. More gear. You saw the Ebonheart high-level gear that's coming in. And then we're also looking at figuring out how to advance your characters more as well. So it's not just, the continued fight for Cyrodiil. There's going to be Imperial City added to it, as well as more gear to get. And we're always looking at other ways to continually add in to your experience of maybe giving you more consumables to use. That's been another request. So there's lots of ways we can expand PvP, but we want to make sure we're not detracting from the Cyrodiil experience and Imperial City soon too.
Okay, this question is from Leona. They're asking, when will we see some time sinks that are not related to fighting, such as mini games, housing, music system, horse races, stuff like that?
Those are all great questions. So some of those things are under discussion now. No promises in the future, but some of the things you heard in the presentation today were getting towards that, like the justice system and things. Even though there is combat there, but we are definitely talking about ways to broaden the system. We've talked already in public about making the fishing system more exciting. We've dropped some hints about horse racing in the past, and we're going to continue down that line too. So there are things that we're working on, but we will reserve the announcement of those until we actually have more information and we know kind of better when they'll come out.
All right, so Hans von Schmidt from Twitch has a burning question. Are we going to get new motifs?
Are we going to get more motifs? Go ahead.
Was it Hans Schmidt?
Hans von Schmidt.
Oh, Hans von Schmidt. All right. Yes.
A simple question has a simple answer.
I wasn't ready. This is from Kego. He asks, what are your plans for stamina builds to compare with Magicka builds?
Oh, great. Nick?
Hi again. That's a good question. It's something that we've certainly seen a lot of feedback about. So there's a number of plans that are in place about this. I'll go through a few of them. First and foremost, the one that we went ahead and already implemented, and that was to make medium armor have a passive that reduced the cost, similar to how light armor has a passive that reduces the cost of spells, so that would make it more comparable and you could have better sustained DPS out of stamina builds. So that was part one. Part two, there's a number of weapon-based attacks that are sort of in need of a DPS boost. Some that come to mind, uppercut, cleave, and several others that are particularly based off of stamina. So those are coming down the line pretty quickly. You'll be seeing some damage boost to those things so that they can be part of builds that are can sustain damage as well as some of the Magicka builds can. We're also doing some things to help bring some parity between spell crit and weapon crit. And for ultimates, for example, we're making it so if you have a really high attack power from your weapon versus from your spell, it'll pick whichever's higher, so that stamina builds aren't sort of weakened in their ultimate relative to Magicka builds. So we're basically hitting it on a whole lot of different fronts because it's something we're acutely aware of. Magicka builds are significantly more popular in our metrics than our stamina, and that's not our intention. So you'll basically be seeing us buffing various stamina abilities until it gets to the point where they're more on par with each other.
All right, so T the Khajiit, one of our favorite Khajiit role players, wants to know, what do we have planned for role players in the future?
I did mention some things there for role players. You know, I think anytime you have emergent gameplay systems where you have things like thieving and you know the player guard systems, those are fun. But I also think the things where players can reward other players, where players can own property in the game or something like that. Like, you know, we just started with our the guild traders coming in, and I think those are systems that really appeal to role players. It's definitely something we're acutely aware of and want to make sure we get into the game. So I think it's just going to be an ongoing effort over time, honestly. We don't have shards. But I understand what you're asking for, absolutely.
All right, here's another one from the forums. The question is, the gold sink is way too high to play different specs. For somebody at vet level, you could be paying 20,000 gold just to respec one morph that does not perform as it should because the skill line is broken. Do you have any plans at all to address the issue of the respec costs?
So to sum up, Nick, respecs cost too much and discourage people from alternate builds.
I'm sorry, did you just say that?
Who asked that?
I'm sorry. That was the name I can't pronounce again. Seismic?
Seismic. All right. Well, Seismic, yes. We're going to do a lot of things. So a few. First and foremost, we recognize that over the last 2 updates, and as well in this one that's coming in just a couple weeks, there's been a number of changes to abilities. So what we're going to do is for the first week that Update 3 is out, we're just going to make respec costs extremely cheap, like one to 100 gold or something like that, so that you can mess around. I assume people would like that. So that'll get you some time to recreate the character based on some of the changes we've made or some of the things you found out in developing it. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and bring it back up to its full cost, but even that's going to be reduced significantly based off of what is probably 25% or so, so that in the long run we can encourage more total build customization. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a feature that is respec just your morphs, and that's going to be extremely cheap. I think a lot of the complaints about the respec had to do with, hey, I just want to change this one morph or advance in this one other different way, but the cost of doing that is actually the same as the full thing. So that's why we're adding that one feature, so that you can just kind of switch around your morphs, and that'll be significantly cheaper, like 100 times cheaper than would the full respec. So that'll allow people to do a good deal more customization in their characters and a little flexibility without making it just so that you respec before every fight.
To add to that, because this is the Future of ESO panel, the plan for the champion system is that as well with those passives, it will have a built-in respec mechanism where you'll really only have to earn a champion point to just respec the way you want to respec. So that'll be built right into that system.
All right, we have one from Lord Simmerg off of Twitch. Sorry if I butchered your name. This is a long one. What are the developers doing, if anything, to help separate PvP from having a role in PvE content? For example, PvP passives and active abilities, giving those who PvP extensively an edge over those who may only wish to focus on PvE content, not wanting to feel forced to do PvP in order to compete against others in PvE content.
Nick.
All right, everybody look at you.
Hi, guys. I guess the answer to that, there's not going to be sort of a really straightforward one for that because it's a very per-case basis. I think a few of the things that they're probably referencing are some of the passives that are in the Alliance War skill lines, and I think a pretty good example is one like the Battle Resurrection. It used to be the case back in the beta where that would allow you to have a faster resurrection time all over the world. And what we did back then to correct for that was to make it so everyone had faster reses, and then that passive applied specifically to battle reses in Cyrodiil. And so I think you might see us take more care to do some things like that. I think probably what this is in reference to is the passive abilities on the Emperor, which are pretty minor in terms of their statistical bonus when you're not the Emperor. But it's something that comes up a lot in feedback about former Emperors being able to dominate various levels of play, and so it's something we look a lot at. And I don't have a specific change that we're going to make just yet, but we are definitely aware of it, and you'll know as soon as we come up with something for it, and we'll announce it to you guys.
To add on to that, one of the things that we feel strongly about is that we don't want this to be a game where just because you're good in PvE, you can't go in and PvP and vice versa. So we've always felt very strongly about that, which is why we keep these things up, anything we introduce in the game should be viable in if you will, both systems of PvEP and PvE. So that's really important to us as well. So again, I don't expect us to keep going down a path of divergence. It should always be that you can go PvP if you want to PvP one night, and you can go PvE if you want to PvE the next.
So here's one that's been kind of a hot topic recently. This is from Emperor Clytus. He asks, do you have plans to discourage Emperor trading?
Emperor trading. Brian.
Matt has authorized me to fly to every single house and cut their hard line.
True story.
So in 1.3, we're going to be making some changes. We know that this has been an issue. I've been watching the forums like crazy about it. There's going to be several things we're doing to work on this. First and foremost, condensing the amount of campaigns from 10 down to 5. That's going to leave it so there's pretty much lesser places for them to go and hide and do this. Another thing is that we are increasing the amount of alliance points it needs to become an emperor. Right now it's only 10,000 AP. That's going to go up to 50,000 AP in patch 1.3. We're also adding a very, very fast degrade rate to siege weaponry. We know one of the tactics that people are using is going to a keep, dropping 20 oil pots down on a corner so nobody can drop down weapons to really defend the keep if they wanted to. So when a weapon is not under control after 1.3, it's going to degrade really, really quick. And lastly, we're going to be adding a 3-day lockout to the guest and home campaign assignment, which is pretty big, considering some of the campaign's durations are going to get shortened to only 7 days, 2 weeks, and 30 days, along with the veteran and non-veteran campaigns, which have also been getting asked for. Those are going in 1.3, so we're making this the first batch of changes to help battle the emperorship trading. We're going to see what happens after that, and we'll keep watching and making sure we keep an eye on it.
But that's definitely, the kind of thing that we wait to see. Like I said before, we put in systems and players find ways to engineer themselves around it. So we'll continue to battle them as long as we need to.
That's a nice way of wording it, engineer around.
There you go. I think we have time for one more question.
I'm going to combine a couple then. So this is about spellcrafting. So Ring-a-Ding 92, Kendros, these are two combined questions. So is a spell tome a one-time use of the spell, or do you just learn the spell? And also, can we create weapon spells or stamina-based spells?
Oh,
let me guess who's going to answer that one.
Yeah. God, I'm sick of me by this point. Okay, answer to the first question is yes, it's consumable, but you can make more of them. So it's definitely going to provide a lot of value to some of the more rare blank tablets that you can find out in the world. If someone's willing to sell a legendary quality, say Ultimate Conjure Flame Atronach off the top of my head, I suspect that would be an extremely valuable in terms of gold item that you might be able to trade to someone else versus something that's made a little more mundane, but you can keep producing them, and that'll definitely spread across the world as the system gets more and more users. The second question was, can you make a stamina ability? We have other plans to expand on different stamina abilities, but one of the spells that you can actually create is Restore Stamina from the Restoration skill. So I actually think you might see some more cycle builds based off that way, right? On the Sorcerer right now, there's an ability called Dark Exchange that you can use to trade stamina for magicka. And there's an ability in the Mages Guild called Equilibrium where you can trade health for magicka, and there's never been sort of the opposite direction, which is magicka for stamina. And that's something I think you might see a lot of people who want to burn stamina builds start to use, because the magicka doesn't necessarily have value if you're all focused on stamina, and that's a way for you to get value out of it.
All right, well, thank you, Internet. Thank you, Dallas. So it's been a great pleasure. Really appreciate it. I think we're going to have a meet and greet for those that are here in Dallas. And for you guys on the Internet, we'll see you in Tamriel. Thanks, everyone.
This country is riven by civil war. The Emperor has fallen, and the ruby throne sits empty. Now is the time to strike. shine as a beacon. Calling you to reign.
We were standing on the edge of discovery. A powerful technology with infinite possibilities. Instead, we let them in. Fused in an unholy union of flesh and metal. Now this brave new world has gone to hell.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elder Scrolls Online Game Director Matt Firor.
Hi, guys. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Future of Elder Scrolls Online panel. I'm Matt Firor. I'm the game director on Elder Scrolls Online. Before we get started, did you guys see that Doom thing they did last night? Really hard to follow that up. That looked awesome. And while I'm on that, thanks to id and Bethesda for having us here to talk today. It's a great honor. It's the first QuakeCon I've been to, so it's been a lot of fun so far. Love it. I love the people. It's great to walk around and see gamers doing what they do best. So thanks for having us. So, in addition to the great audience we have here, we are live streaming this on Twitch on the Bethesda channel. So welcome to all you guys out there in internet land. The way this is going to work today is we have a panel of ESO devs that are going to come out and talk about different parts of the game. After that, we'll follow it up with the Q&A that we've been collecting from Twitch and also from our forums and from Reddit. So before we bring them out, though, just a few words. It's been, believe it or not, only about 12, 13 weeks since Elder Scrolls Online launched. So it seems like a long time, but it actually hasn't been that long. So this is a great time for us to talk about what's going to come up next, what's coming up in the future, because we've gotten through kind of the trials and tribulations of a major MMO launch. Things are pretty smooth now, and now we're going to talk about what we're working on in the future. So you guys, if you read the forums and everything, you notice about 2 weeks ago we started to talk about our future plans a lot more. I wrote a blog post. Paul Sage has been doing a lot of interviews. This presentation is going to be follow-up to that. You're actually going to see some video in-game of what we're talking about, of some of the cool systems that we're working on. We're going to go into a little depth on these. So it's going to be about two major initiatives that we're working on: the revamp of our veteran content systems and replacing it with the champion system, and also the justice system. He's going to be going into both of them in this presentation. Nick Kronkle, gameplay lead. Nick's going to be talking about one of the most requested features in ESO, which is spellcrafting, and he's going to show off some videos too. And last, but certainly not least, is Jared Carr, our art director. So Jared's responsible for picking up the mics that fell on the floor, as well as he is the guy responsible in large part for making this a really, really kick-ass, awesome-looking game. So he is going to be talking to you guys about some PvE zones that we're working on, some new content. He's going to be going over some new armors and weapons that are going to be going into the game, and also what we're doing to make combat and animations much more responsive. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over now to Brian Wheeler, who is going to talk to you about the Imperial City. Thanks, everyone, and I'll be back on later.
Well, now that the boss is gone, before I talk about Imperial City, again, I'm Brian Wheeler, the lead PvP designer, and we have had a PvP contest here at QuakeCon. It's been great having the team show up, having you guys show up to support them. It's the first ever PvP contest we had, and we have our 3 finalists for tomorrow. Come out to the booth, cheer them on. You see them on Twitch out there, and we hope you guys like watching it as much as we like having them fight in it. So let's get to the meat, right? People have been asking about Imperial City ever since we pretty much announced. So now we're going to finally give you some details of it. First and foremost, it is a PvP zone. You get to go in there, kill enemy players. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's in Cyrodiil. It's PvP flagged. Not only is it PvP flagged, but there's also a lot of really cool monsters in there to kill. There's bosses, mini bosses out there, some of which you'll see in some videos coming up, that the team has done a really good job making them look pretty much badass as possible. The other big point about it is that you get to rid Imperial City of Molag Bal's minions, and this is his last-ditch effort. He's trying to take over Imperial City with that huge anchor. If you've been inside of Cyrodiil at all, you've seen the white gold tower with the big anchor on it and the chain sticking into the city. This is your chance to go in there and experience that content and actually capture several districts. When you capture the districts, you'll get a lot of rewards for it. You can actually respawn at a district once you own it, much like the keeps out in Cyrodiil. So that's a really cool bonus that we're adding to it. There's unique bosses and mini bosses like I mentioned before, and of course, something that's a really big draw is the PvE quests, as well as the monsters give a lot of XP and a lot of gold. This is very important because it makes not only rewards for the PvPers to kill other people, which I love doing, but also just having everybody go out there and experience as much cool content as possible to get a lot of really good rewards for it, and having the experience and thrill of rush of being able to get killed by enemy players. That's a whole lot of fun. So in case you're curious where Cyrodiil is and you've been living under a rock, and it's where Oblivion took place, but also Imperial City is kind of right there. It's in the middle, so, you know, where else would it be? It's the center of Cyrodiil. It's really cool, and you can kind of get a hint of what the huge anchor on top of White Gold Tower looks like. So what's going on in there? Everybody knows that the arena exists in there, and this is 700 years ago since Oblivion. But it's a little different. The Dremora have taken over. Again, this is sort of like they have nothing else to do. They've taken the Imperials and enslaved them. So why not throw them in the arena, have some pretty sick gladiatorial games with them, have them get killed, and it's your job to kind of go in there and help stop it. And that's just in one of the districts. But it sort of looks a little like this. Ooh.
About an hour and a half of information about ESO, and you're actually going to see some cool stuff. So before I get started, I want to, we get everyone out here. Want to talk about the team. We have a really, really great dev team on ESO. These guys are tons of experience. And I cannot think of a better bunch of people to work with. So I'm going to bring them out one at a time, and I'll introduce them as I go. First up is Brian Wheeler. He's our lead PvP designer. He's going to be talking to you about the... He'll be talking to you guys about the Imperial City, our first PvE PvP dungeon, and you can see what the Imperial City's like 700 years before Oblivion, after a major Daedric invasion. Next up is Rich Lambert, our lead content designer. Rich is going to talk about things we're doing to help with grouping, systems that we're working on, and some new areas of the game. Next up, Jesse McIntyre, our lead client programmer. So, games like ESO are obviously hugely complex. There's a bunch of systems. People always ask us, what does it take to put in a technical feature into ESO? So we decided to put a spotlight on one feature that we're working on right now, which is an advanced facial animation system, so that characters look more realistic and lifelike when you talk to them. So Jesse's going to go over that. Just kind of spotlight one of the cool things that we're working on. Paul Sage, next, creative director. Little known facts about Paul Sage, he is indeed a Dallas native. So, so Paul has been giving interviews the last couple of weeks.
Dromora were cheering on, the guys getting all murdered up. I feel bad for them. But you get to go help them out. So, one of the next districts is the Arboretum. This is another one of those very iconic districts that we wanted to show that it isn't completely taken over yet by the Cold Harbor. You get to see a little bit of flora and fauna in here that's not fully corrupted, and you get to go in there and help make sure that life carries on when you kick out the Dromora. And it looks a little bit something like this. Again, you'll recognize some Imperial architecture. You see the Imperial sigils, and we're doing our best to make sure it stays faithful to Oblivion, just like what we did with Cyrodiil. That's pretty cool looking. Next we have the market. This is another district that's pretty iconic, but this is one that you can actually capture. And when you capture it, there's going to be basically a switch from Daedric control to an alliance control, and you can actually take a district back from another alliance. And again, once you own it, you can actually respawn there, but also other things like that give you your alliance a bonus. In this situation, in the market, they have specific trade skill stations that let you create Imperial Daedric gear. It's a new armor set that's coming out with Imperial City. It looks really cool. Jared is actually going to give you a preview of what that looks like later on. The armor's really badass, and you'll be able to make it once you flip the market district.